If you've ever had your work stolen by your boss, then you already know how this feels. But imagine if the project they stole from you changed the entire company. Now imagine what happens when you come back years later, and you're the one in charge. Oh, I've got a story for you. But first, don't forget to click subscribe for more real-life revenge stories like this. The first time I showed Derek the prototype, I still believed he was the kind of man who lifted people up. I was 25, barely out of grad school, and had just landed a junior developer role at Solvex Technologies, a mid-sized firm scrambling to stay relevant in an industry it no longer understood. Most days were filled with bloated meetings and legacy code. But nights were different. That was when I worked on Nova. Nova was a real-time optimization engine that could predict server load behavior hours ahead. It was smart, light, and if deployed right, could reduce cloud costs by up to 40%. I built it from scratch. No one asked me to. I did it in secret. And I finished it in 2 months. Derek, the CTO, was everything you expected from someone with too much power and too little humility. He didn't write code anymore, just shook hands, made promises, and reminded everyone how he built this place. When I finally showed him Nova, he said, "Interesting. Real-time prediction? I'll be honest, not sure the board will get it. He told me to keep it between us. He told me not to say a word to anyone else. He told me he'd feel it out first." 2 weeks later, at the quarterly town hall, Derek stood under a giant screen with my slides, the Nova architecture, flowchart, cost savings analysis, all of it. He called it Project Dawn. He smiled like a shark. "My team and I have been building a new predictive engine. We believe this will revolutionize our infrastructure." I just sat there in the audience, blinking. No mention of my name, no credit, not even a nod in my direction. My throat was dry, my palms burned, my vision blurred. I waited until the applause died down. I waited until he walked past me and winked, and I realized he hadn't just stolen my work, he was erasing me from it. Over. The next 6 months, Derek paraded Nova around to clients and investors. The code got implemented, the cost savings were real, and the board rewarded him with a bonus I'll never forget: $500,000. Meanwhile, I was still a junior dev making $72K and getting assigned bug tickets on systems he couldn't explain if he tried. The final straw came when HR sent out an internal newsletter. It read, "Congratulations to Derek Miller, whose vision and leadership launched Project Dawn into reality." That was when something inside me snapped. I didn't quit right away. I couldn't. I had rent to pay, student loans, and no safety net. But I started making moves. Every weekend, every late night after work, I rewrote Nova from the ground up. A cleaner version, leaner, smarter, mine, and I named it Nova Zero. Because I was hitting reset. I saved every version in a private cloud, registered it under a shell company. I even consulted a lawyer on how to protect open source licenses under anonymous ownership. And when I finally left Solvex, no one even noticed. Not Derek, not HR, not the people who had clapped at the town hall. But that was fine, because I wasn't coming back as an employee. I was coming back as something else. For the first few months after leaving Solvex, I went quiet. No dramatic LinkedIn post. No exit email. Just silence. The kind of silence that feels like mourning, except what I was burying wasn't grief. It was obedience. I rented a shoebox apartment above a laundromat and worked freelance gigs to survive. API integrations, cybersecurity patch jobs, The kind of work nobody notices unless it breaks. But every spare hour went into Nova Zero. If Nova was the seed, Nova Zero was the evolution. I redesigned its AI core using new lightweight models. I built an adaptive interface that could scale from small startups to enterprise servers. I made it beautiful, accessible, transparent. Everything Solvex would never let it be. By month 7, I had a demo. By month 9, I had a platform. By year 1, I had clients. I never marketed myself publicly. I let Nova Zero speak. One day, I got an email from a CTO at a logistics startup in Berlin. Saw your engine being used in a partner firm. We cut 38% off our AWS bill in 3 weeks. Can we get enterprise licensing? I blinked, then reread it 5 more times. That one deal alone paid off my debt. Then came another, and another. Soon, Nova Zero was quietly embedded in over 40 companies, most of them struggling to compete with bloated legacy systems like Solvex's. And the best part? They had no idea who I was, until one of them forwarded me an RFP from Solvex Technologies. Apparently their system was lagging. Costs were climbing again. Nova's backend hadn't been updated in over a year. They were looking to integrate a third-party optimization tool. They were looking for me, but they didn't know it yet. I scheduled the video call under my company's alias, Thalia Systems. I used my middle name. I wore glasses, pinned my hair back, softened my voice, and when the call connected, there he was, Derek Miller. Still with the same self-satisfied smirk. Still with his tie too tight and ego too big. But now, he looked older, tired, a little nervous. He didn't recognize me, didn't blink, didn't even hesitate before saying, "We're impressed with your system. We'd like to test Nova Zero in our beta environment. If it delivers, we're prepared to offer a long-term licensing deal." Exclusive. I smiled. "You want exclusivity?" He nodded. "We're trying to clean up some legacy decisions." I wanted to laugh. Legacy decisions, like stealing my work. The call ended. I muted myself before I burst into a grin. That night, I didn't sleep. I just stared at the screen, reading his follow-up email over and over again. The same man who took everything from me was now offering me a contract to fix the mess he made of my stolen code. But this wasn't about money. It wasn't even about revenge. Not yet. It was about the setup, and I wasn't going to rush it. I sent over the test license. Let them play with it. Watch them implement the system and start bragging again on investor calls. But this time, I watermarked every function, logged every call, and prepared the receipts. Because when the time came, I wasn't going to ask for credit. I was going to take everything. It started small. A few functions in Nova Zero were deliberately timed to underperform, but only when the user violated the usage clause in the contract. Like when Solvex tried to reverse engineer my code to mimic it in-house. Within 72 hours, Derek's team was buried in errors they couldn't trace. I had designed Nova Zero to be impenetrable without a specific API key bound to my servers. They couldn't even tell if it was a glitch or sabotage. They just knew it stopped working when they got greedy, and that's when I got the first desperate email from his engineering manager. "We think there's a compatibility conflict. Can we get on a call ASAP?" I said I'd need to loop in our lead developer. Then, for the first time in 2 years, I turned my webcam on. Derek's face, when I appeared in the video window, priceless. He blinked twice, leaned forward, and his entire body stiffened. I let the silence stretch. Then I smiled. "Hi, Derek. Long time," he stammered. "Wait, you're with Thalia Systems?" I shrugged. "Technically, I am Thalia Systems." His jaw clenched. "Nova was my—" I cut him off, cool and controlled. "Nova was mine. Always was. You just renamed it before you even understood it." The call went dead quiet. His engineer looked like he wanted to disappear. I ended the meeting with a single sentence. "If you want the engine to keep running, you'll need to speak to legal." Over the next week, Solvex was in chaos. They couldn't legally terminate the license without violating breach of use clauses. And if they pushed it too far, Nova Zero would lock them out completely. I watched it all unfold from the comfort of my apartment, still above the laundromat, still quiet. But not for long, because someone else was watching too. 3 days later, I got a LinkedIn message from a woman named Marla Jin, senior partner at a private equity firm. I recognized her name instantly. She was ruthless, precise, and she had a reputation for flipping companies like real estate. Break them down, rebuild them, sell them for triple. She wrote, "Been watching your product. Love Nova Zero. Just heard Solvex is bleeding cash. We should talk. We met for coffee. We met." Marla was blunt. "They overextended. Their infrastructure is garbage. Your system is half the only thing keeping them afloat, and even that's conditional." I nodded slowly. "So?" Marla smirked. "So I want to buy them, but I want you to be part of the deal." That's when she slid a folder across the table. Inside was a confidential breakdown of Solvex's financials. They were worse than I thought. Revenue was down, retention was tanking, and Derek had taken a $1.2 million bonus last year while laying off half his dev team. Marla sipped her espresso. "You want to destroy him?" she said. I didn't blink. "No." I leaned forward. "I want to replace him." 2 months later, the deal was done. Solvex was acquired under Marla's umbrella firm, folded into a new enterprise initiative, and I was officially named Chief Technology Officer of the parent company's infrastructure division. Which meant I now had authority over Derek. The announcement email hit the company inboxes at 9 a.m. sharp. Subject: Welcome our new executive leader, Thalia Systems founder and CTO. I didn't sign it with my name. I signed it, Nova Zero. Across town, in the Solvex headquarters, Derek would be reading that email and realizing the girl he'd erased just became his boss's boss. The first day I walked into Solvex's building again, it didn't feel like revenge. It felt like returning to a crime scene. The glass walls, the sterile white hallways, the motivational posters about vision and collaboration. Everything looked the same, except this time, they had to hold the door open for me. Derek wasn't in the welcome meeting. Of course he wasn't. He was probably hiding in his office trying to figure out how to spin this. How to claw back power, reassert control, twist the narrative in his favor. But the funny thing about men like Derek, they only know how to lead from the top. They don't know what to do when the hierarchy flips. At noon, my calendar auto-sent an invite. Performance Strategy Alignment, Derek Miller plus CTO. I made sure it was in the glass-walled executive conference room, where everyone could see him walk in, but no one could hear what would be said. He arrived 10 minutes late. Didn't knock. Didn't say hello, just stood across from me with his jaw tight. "Is this a joke?" he said. I set my pen down slowly. "No, Derek. This is a performance review." He laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You think you can come in here and humiliate me?" "No," I said. "I think you did that all on your own." He opened his mouth, probably to blame someone, to twist facts, to gaslight me one more time. I stopped him with a folder. "Here's a list of your personal expenses logged as R&D reimbursements, international flights, golf club memberships, and a $9,800 espresso machine labeled office wellness equipment." He went pale. "I didn't approve those myself," he muttered. I tilted my head. "Your name's on the requisition form." I slid the second folder across the table. "This is a comparative productivity report showing Nova Zero increased performance by 46% since its partial integration. Your version of the system has had 0 commits in over 14 months. Silence. Outside, someone in sales walked by and glanced in. Derek shifted, suddenly aware of the eyes, the glass walls, the transparency. "You're setting me up," he said. I looked him in the eyes. "No, Derek, I'm giving you a choice." He blinked. "Step down, take your golden parachute, and walk away with what's left of your dignity. Or I bring all of this to the board, including the internal emails you deleted. Don't worry, I recovered them. Especially the ones where you pitched my prototype as your own." His hands clenched. "You can't just erase me," he hissed, and I smiled. "Oh, Derek, I'm not erasing you." I leaned forward. "I'm archiving you." He resigned by the end of the week. No press release, no farewell party, just a cold clinical memo from HR. Effective immediately, Derek Miller has stepped down from his role to pursue other opportunities. We thank him for his service. The next time I stood in that town hall stage, it was under my own name. I wore a gray suit. No flash, no theatrics, just clarity. Solvex lost its way because leadership stopped listening. That ends today. There wasn't applause at first. Just quiet. Then, from the back, someone started clapping. Then another. And another. Until the whole room filled with something I'd never gotten before. Respect. And Derek? He started a podcast. About leadership. It got 37 views. I thought taking down Derek would be the hard part. But taking a title doesn't mean you've earned trust. And in places like Solvex, where rot doesn't just sit at the top but spreads through every floor, cleaning house means discovering who was loyal to the lie. 2 weeks after his resignation, the HR team scheduled a re-engagement roundtable to reintroduce me as the new technical leadership. Not everyone showed up. Some were cold, some were curious, some smiled too wide. But one person in particular? Ryan. Ryan used to be just another software engineer. Back when I was buried under QA tickets and ignored in team meetings, he was one of the few who'd offer quiet encouragement. "You should push that idea further," he once said. "Don't wait for permission." I remembered that. I remembered him. So when I stepped into the room and saw his face tight with something unreadable, I knew something had shifted. After the session, I asked him to stay behind. He didn't sit. "Didn't think you'd come back," he said flatly. "I didn't think I'd need to," I replied. Silence. Then quietly, "You're not who I thought you'd be." I blinked. "Meaning?" "You used to be one of us, quiet, thoughtful. Now you walk around here like you're untouchable." There it was. Not bitterness, not jealousy, discomfort. I'd crossed the line between them and me. I sat down, slowly. Ryan, you ever had someone steal your work? His jaw clenched, but he nodded. You ever sit in a room and hear your ideas repeated back to you by someone higher up? Someone who got paid more to do less? Another nod. I leaned forward. Then you know exactly why I walk the way I do now. I earned it. I built it. And I remember how they treated us. That doesn't mean I forgot who I am. It means I know exactly how not to lead. He didn't say anything right away. Then he sat. And for the first time in days, I saw something flicker behind his eyes. Not agreement, not allegiance, but understanding. Still, not everyone was that open. A month into my leadership, the whispers started. She's here to clean house. She's going to fire everyone who used to work with Derek. I heard she's replacing the whole dev team with outside contractors. It didn't matter that none of it was true. In toxic systems, people cling to fear like it's structure. That's all me. When I decided to do something risky, I held a company-wide town hall. Not in a boardroom, not behind a podium, but in the main break area. No slides. No script, just me. I stood on a bench and said, loud enough for every coffee mug to still, I'm not here to punish the past. I'm here to protect the future. Some of you were bystanders. Some of you were complicit. And some of you clapped when Derek pitched my work as his own. No one moved. I looked around the room. I'm not asking for apologies. I'm asking for work. If you're here to build something better, stay. If you're here to preserve the old power structure, you're going to have a very uncomfortable year. Silence. Then Ryan stepped forward. Where do we start? And just like that, the tide began to turn. In the weeks that followed, I created an anonymous feedback channel for junior developers, reinstated the mentorship program that had been shelved for budget reasons, unpacked 5 years' worth of HR complaints Derek had buried. We lost some people, but the ones who stayed? They weren't just employees anymore. They were builders. But one day, I got a letter. Mailed. No return address. Handwritten. You think you've won. But not everyone who clapped for you wants you to stay on that bench. Some of us are still loyal to the old way. And we're watching. I folded it carefully. Not afraid. Not surprised. Because some ghosts don't leave quietly. And some wars don't end when the tyrant falls. They just change shape. There was no return address. No signature. Just that single line in tight, slanted ink. Some of us are still loyal to the old way. And we're watching. It didn't scare me, but it focused me. Because in tech, sabotage doesn't look like explosions. It looks like code pushed at midnight that breaks systems by morning. It looks like Slack messages deleted. It looks like team members smiling too much, when they shouldn't be smiling at all. 3 days after the letter arrived, our staging. Server went dark. No warning. No logged anomalies. Just total blackout. We traced it to a faulty merge from a junior engineer's branch. Except that engineer swore he never pushed it, and the timestamps didn't match his login session. Someone had spoofed credentials. Someone inside. I convened a crisis call at 7 a.m. Sharp, DevOps, security, product, legal, and Ryan. He'd quietly earned a seat at that table. Since the break room speech, he'd been solid, steady, a quiet believer. Or so I thought. As we reviewed the incident log, something strange caught my eye. 2 days earlier, there had been an access request to my personal archive folder on the internal cloud. A folder I had locked. A folder only 2 people had clearance to, myself, and the CTO's admin, but the system showed access through a proxy VPN, someone trying not to be seen. I paused the meeting. Who was on shift during this timestamp? Ryan didn't flinch. He just spoke first. That's when I was rebuilding. The security keys. I saw some weird traffic, too. I flagged it, remember? I looked at him closely. Measured. Calm. Controlled. Too controlled. After the meeting, I walked back to my office. Closed the door. Sat alone in the quiet hum of fluorescent, light and betrayal. I went back through every log, every message, every line of code tied to the outage. And then I saw it. A piece of legacy syntax embedded in the sabotage branch. Nova syntax. From the original version Derek had stolen. From a version only one other person had access to before it went public. Ryan. That night, I didn't sleep. I didn't cry. I strategized. The next morning, I walked into the office early, earlier than anyone else. And on Ryan's desk, I left a sealed envelope. Inside, a printout of the Access Log A copy of the altered branch's sticky note in my handwriting. Second chances don't come in threes. He didn't come in that day. Or, the next HR confirmed he sent a resignation email at 2:14 a.m. No explanation. No goodbye. Just silence. Later that week, a recruiter told me he'd interviewed at another startup, one of our competitors, claimed he'd been pushed out for being too loyal to the old codebase. I didn't respond. Because people like Ryan, they don't hate change. They hate not being the ones who decide when it happens. And still, I couldn't help but feel it. Not rage, not sadness, but the slow, creeping weight of realizing Derek may have been the fire. But Ryan was the ash still clinging to the walls. The ghosts of bad leadership linger long after the leaders leave. And if I was going to rebuild this company for real, I had to face the truth. Revenge had been the easy part. Now came the hard part, redemption. There's something no one tells you about finally being in charge. You don't feel powerful. You feel responsible for the walls, the culture, the people who stayed quiet too long, and the ones who spoke too late. You inherit not just the title, but the ghosts, and they don't leave until you name them. After Ryan's quiet exit, the air in Solvex changed again, lighter, but not necessarily warmer. The team moved through the halls like they were waiting for something, waiting for me to snap, to punish, to purge. I didn't. Not yet. Because if I wanted to fix what Derek broke, I had to understand why so many stayed loyal to him in the first place. So I called a meeting. Not in the break room this time. This wasn't about showmanship. This was about the foundation. I gathered 5 people, not senior managers, not department heads, but the ones who'd been there since the early years. The ones who stayed when others fled. The ones whose names were barely known, but whose presence shaped everything. When they entered the room, they looked uneasy. I'm not here to reprimand, I said. I'm here to listen. They didn't believe me at first. But then Maya, an infrastructure engineer who had been here for 12 years, spoke. You want the truth? She said. I nodded. She crossed her arms. We didn't love Derek. We feared him. We feared what would happen if we challenged him. People who did disappeared. Quietly. Their seats were reassigned before their chairs went cold. I swallowed. Hard. Why didn't anyone report it? She laughed, bitter. To who? HR reported to him. Another engineer, Mark, added quietly. We learned early on that speaking up only painted a target on your back, even when you were right. Maya looked at me then, something sharp in her gaze. So maybe ask yourself why Ryan felt the need to sabotage you. Maybe it wasn't just ego. Maybe it was fear that he'd be next. That one hit. Not because I forgave Ryan, but because I finally understood. He wasn't resisting change. He was reliving trauma. That night I stayed late, alone in the empty office. The halls echoed with years of silences, of shut doors, of ideas buried in drawers because they didn't come from the right mouths. And I knew, if I didn't rebuild how people were allowed to speak, nothing would ever change. So I did something radical. I gutted the structure, removed Derek's old reporting tree, collapsed 3 bloated departments into cross-functional pods, eliminated the need to escalate rule, and replaced it with a public problem board, a space where any employee could anonymously raise system flaws, culture gaps, or abuses of power. And for every concern posted, I responded, personally, publicly, no. Filters. No spin. It didn't fix everything overnight. Some people left. Some called it chaotic. But others, they started to breathe differently, speak differently, work differently. I walked by a product meeting one afternoon and heard a junior dev say, "Wait, maybe we should bring this to Nova Zero's creator directly. She'll want to hear it." They didn't say my name, but they spoke it with respect. Later, Maya stopped by my office. No appointment, no laptop, just her. "I didn't think it was possible," she said. "Not here." I leaned back in my chair. "What?" She smiled faintly. "Change that doesn't taste like blood." That night, I left the office late again. But this time I paused before locking my door. Because in the distance, on the far side of the office near the old CEO suite, I saw something. A figure standing in the dark, arms crossed, watching me. The figure didn't move, just stood there in the dark near the old CEO office, motionless. Watching, I stepped forward. My heels echoed off the polished tile as I approached, slowly. "Who's there?" The figure stepped into the faint glow of the hallway light. Marla, the woman who had helped me buy the company, the one who said she wanted to back me, build something new. Only now, her face looked different, calculating, like someone reviewing a report they already knew the ending to. "You've made quite the statement," she said. "Is that a compliment or a warning?" I asked. She shrugged. "Depends who. You ask, some of the investors are nervous." I folded my arms. "Because I cleaned house?" "No, because you've made it clear you're not afraid of fire." Silence stretched between us. Then she added, "They're talking about replacing you. Not immediately, but soon." My stomach didn't drop. I'd known the board wouldn't like me forever. Reform is expensive. Transparency costs comfort. But hearing it confirmed, that was different. "Who started the conversation?" I asked quietly. She didn't blink. "Me." I turned away before I could show it. The sting, the betrayal, the pattern. She'd used me to clean up Solvex. Now she wanted to hand it off. Polish the brand, sell the pieces, take the credit. Sound familiar? I laughed bitterly. You wanted someone to burn the place down for you. You were good at it. But now you want someone who'll sit pretty. She didn't deny it. You're brilliant, but you're not compliant. They don't want bold, they want manageable. For a moment, I saw the old cycle winding up. Again, the powerful taking the credit, the quiet ones doing the work, the ones like me being praised, until we got inconvenient. But this time, they wouldn't bury me with fake praise, because this time I'd planned for it. Check your inbox, I said calmly. She frowned, pulled out her phone, tapped, scanned, stiffened. I watched the blood drain from her face. You transferred, she whispered. 49%, I said. To the employees. Through a protected trust, each worker who stayed through the restructuring now owned shares. Collective ownership, collective power. They didn't just work for Solvex. They were Solvex. You can't do that, she breathed. I already did. She blinked hard, calculating. I could still push for your exit. I stepped close, and I could go public. With what you plan to do. With the old deals Derek signed with you. The non-competes you enforced. The HR complaints you buried when you backed him the first time. Marla's jaw tensed. Her tongue clicked against her teeth. Be smart, she hissed. I am, I said. That's what scares you. She left without another word. The next day, I stood before the company. No stage, no script, just me. I told them the truth. That we weren't a perfect company. That we'd been broken by ego, rebuilt through fire, and now owned by us. I said, no one gets to erase you again. Not under my watch. Not while your work builds this place. That night, I went home. Sat in my tiny apartment above the laundromat. Nova Zero blinked on my screen. Quiet. Alive. And I finally closed the codebase. Not because it was done, but because I was. He took credit for my invention, so I took everything, and I built something better, something they couldn't steal.